Hello and thanks for watching this Cloud9 ERP Solutions video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to talk about project accounting. We're going to walk you through a fixed bid project. We're going to create activities to it, and we're going to bill out the customer and continue to proceed with this project and show all the accountability that project accounting has. So you can see a brand new project here. And notice at the top of the screen, you can see project ID new. That'll automatically get signed based on our sequence as soon as we create and save the project. We will pick a customer. And we can also pick a template. So the way the template works is it gives you the ability to set up a lot of the project in advance and not have to continue to add things over and over again. So when we look at a template, you can see we can configure a lot of the information you saw on the project screen previously. So typically, when we look at tasks, for example, this is all the tasks that we would normally use in this project template. And you have all your implementation, discovery, and all the kinds of things that we do when we go through an implementation. Additionally, you can have your revenue and cost budget. All of these things we'll get into in a moment, but this is the concept behind the project templates. It allows you to fill in a lot of the information for the project, so you don't have to do it every single time. So let's go back to this project, and we'll select an implementation, and we can give it a name, so that we can easily find it later on. That's going to be very helpful when we pick and choose activities that we want a cost code to. Over here, we have the ability to determine how detailed we want our revenue and cost budget. So the first question is what is a revenue budget and a cost budget? Well, if we jump over, we have the ability to define what our budget is for billing our customer differently than what is our cost budget for tracking our internal activities and any other costs that are associated to this project. So for example, if I create an activity to a project, to this project, and maybe I spend an hour and it's to discover the organization, I'll create an activity and I'll pick my project and I'll pick this activity. And consequently, the time, quantity, and amount of costs will hit the actuals for this particular project at the cost on this line. So I can see how much am I spending, which is it costing me, for each of these lines individually. So that's that. And then for the revenue, how do I want to bill the customer? To what level of detail do I want to bill the customer? So over here, I can pick the project task. So notice I have just some revenue lines here. I could make it simple, but for the purposes of the customer, I could provide them different levels of billing. And you'll use this for different levels of milestones that perhaps you've agreed to in advance. And maybe this is what you're done with the customer. You've said, hey, when we achieve 50% of implementation planning, then we'll bill you this way. So these are all different options that you can do, and this is the revenue. This is what we're going to generate invoices for our customers, and this is how we're going to track our internal costs. Now, when we go back to the level, I can budget on the revenue or the cost at a task and an item level, or just a task level. So the item allows you to pick an inventory ID. So maybe, for example, you have different non-stock inventory IDs or inventory items that you want to group here up against your revenue items. So for example, yes, this is our first item. This is implementation revenue, but maybe we want to have 3 or 4 line items and have it break out by the inventory ID. We can do that if we choose the task and item. Now, what's not enabled here, and what we're not going to get into today, is the ability to also do cost codes. So for construction companies where you have cost codes, and maybe you use the division system, divisions 0 through 16, where division 0 is general conditions, division 1 is site work, and so on and so forth. those different divisions you can create as cost codes in your system. But we're going to make this simple, and it's going to be task for revenue and cost budget. You have some static fields as to the start dates and end dates. You can choose a project manager here. In Acumatica, the latest versions allow you to have projects in different currencies and then also bill in a different currency as well. So you could be visibly looking at this in, for example, US dollars, but maybe you're billing the customer in Canadian dollars. So your project manager would closely resemble that project currency because that's what the project manager is used to working in. But of course, you're going to convert that to Canadian before the invoice goes out. And then if we scroll down, we have a billing rule. So let's take a look at this so we can see how it works. And this particular billing rule is set up for progress billing. We also have time and material. That'll be a different video in the future. But progress billing allows us to create percentages complete and allows us to generate our invoices based on these rules. So notice there's one step here. It's just billing. And we're set to progress billing here. And then we could even define what our invoice description looks like or the line description looks like and where we pull the sales account from. So we'll close this and we'll just note a few other things. Notice our visibility is set here to all the different modules. And we also have employee restrictions. So right now it's not checked. But if you check this box and you come over to your employees section, you could define which employees can actually open and create activities against this project. So that's right there. So let's go over to tasks. So over here, you can see all the base tasks. And you can see they have task IDs. We've used a numbering sequence that makes sense for us. You can go over here and update the completed percentage. Of course, this is in planning right now. But you can change the status and change this to active. And now as you're going through it, now you can change the completed. You can only change the completed percentage for something that's active, not for something that's in planned. But notice you can have different billing rules for each task if you want to. You can even have a different set of rates if you want to. We have a flat rate here, but you get the idea. Also notice over to the right, you can have different task start dates and ending dates that you're proposing. These are the proposed dates that are budgeted. So let's activate the project. Notice it's in planning. So in addition to the status for the project, of course, we just showed you the status for each of the tasks. And now let's create some entries against this project. So as indicated before, Acumatica gives all these different areas, these modules, the ability to report back revenue and costs against the project. So you can see here, general ledger, accounts payable, AR, sales orders, purchase orders. We got cash management, CRM, time entries. You can do direct time entries and expenses, expense claims. So suffice to say, there's a number of different ways to update this project for the convenience of your employees and their various areas and jobs throughout this customer's project. So, but one thing we can do is we can go over to activities in the project and create an activity. So we'll go over here and we'll create a note. And maybe it's set up project. And we have the ability to set the time and the owner. So notice the project automatically comes up and now we could select any task that's active. So we can say, all right, well, this was organization discovery. And then we could pick a time. So you could pick a time here and hit complete. Now, Cloud9 ERP Solutions added these custom buttons so to make it easier for us to select the amount of time. But in this case, I'm just going to put the time here and hit complete. So now we have this activity for 15 minutes that's been updated. Now, in order to get this activity to show up, we need to release the time activity. So if we go over here to release time activities, you can see our activity here. And if we check the box, of course, this can be scheduled. You can do this every hour, every day, however often you want to release activities. But if we click process here, you could see we've received one error. So if you take a look at it, the errors are very well defined. And what you can see here is that the activity we tried to post to is not in an active status. So if we go back and we go over to our project, and we go over to tasks, you'll see that the task that we picked is still in planning. So we could change that to active, save it, go back to our release activities, hit process, and now you can see that it's been processed. This gives you a good level of control because, of course, we don't want any activities to hit a task that's not active or is completed. So if we go back to the project and go back to our cost budget, notice what happened here. We now have $25 in actual amount that's accruing to this project. So that's great. That's starting to bring up our cost levels. Additionally, if we go to balances, you can see your income, your revenue, and your labor summarized here. Now, Acumatica gives us the ability to take our different tasks, you can see them here, and group them into an account group. So, for example, if we go back to our revenue budget, you can see these 4 lines are part of the revenue account group. Therefore, they'll roll up to that under the balances. And the same thing goes for cost. The account group here is labor, and therefore it'll roll up to the labor sub-item. So this can all be defined under projects account groups. You could define how you want it to be done, and therefore it will automatically sum it up and give you really good visibility. Now, if we go to the revenue budget, so we have these revenue line items. We added all these tasks, and you could tell what the tasks are by jumping over here and seeing what the descriptions are. Additionally, you could take the task headings and bring them over here. So I'm using Control-C and Control-V to paste. And what we don't have here is our original budget quantity and rates. So this is essentially the proposal that we won with the customer. This is the project proposal, the statement of work, however you define it. This essentially comes out to be the numbers that we have sold to the customer. So let's say the implementation for revenue is 10,000, and maybe the governance, the project management part of it, is 5,000, and the preparation is 2,500. We put the quantity in, and we hit the refresh button up here. Go back to balances. You can see the 25,000. So now as we bill against this, we can see our performance. Additionally, we didn't have a cost budget. So maybe for these items, for the discovery organization, we originally budgeted that we would have 40 hours, and maybe that's $1,800. So when we save it and go back to balances and we refresh, you can see that starting to accumulate. So now we have our budget and we have our actuals. And you can start to see the performance. The performance is a percentage of the actual versus the budget amount. So now for our next step, let's go and create an accounts payable invoice, and we'll post something to this. So to do that, we'll go over to our cost budget, and let's say we want to post a bill that has to do with organization. So if we go to payables and we do a new bill, we select a vendor, We'll add a line item here. And let's say it's $250. And we'll pick an account. Subcontracted services. And we'll pick our project, which it found. And then we'll pick our discovery, organization. We'll give it a vendor reference number. We'll remove the hold. And we'll release it. Now, if we go back to the project and we go over to our cost budget, you can see what Acumatica did here. So it added another line item for $250. It did not put it under labor. The reason for that is if we go to our project and we look at account groups, we talked about this earlier. You can see here we have different account groups. So all of our labor shows up here, and that's automatic. When we create and pick the activity, it'll fall into here. But it picked default. So what is default? Well, this is an expense item. It's not an off balance, meaning it tracks the GL accounts that we hit from accounts payable, and it'll automatically pick this account group. So we can have as many income and expense account groups to break down our balance area as much as we want. Again, notice we have a new line item here for default expense group. We go back and we look at this. Notice what it's doing. It's picking and looking at all these accounts. It found subcontracted services, and it automatically knew to put it into this account group. And just taking a look at this, if we wanted to create a new one, you have the ability to do all sorts of different ones: income, expense, liability, asset, and of course the off balance I talked to you about for the labor. So if we go back to our project, again, we picked up a $250 fee to the default expense group. You could label it any way you want. We also have this labor here. On the other side of things, if I create an invoice, and I do a customer lookup, I find this customer here. And notice how important it is to pick the right customer because our project is linked to the customer. But if I search for the project, here you can see the project now. And if I wanted to add a cost to this, maybe it's an implementation. Normally we would invoice directly from the project because it's a fixed bid, but maybe there's an additional service or something along those lines. Or there's a travel expense or something and we want to put it in the project. We can put a quantity in here, put the amount, and then if we scroll over to here to the task, we could decide what we're putting it into. And in this case, we're going to put it into implementation revenue, although we could put it in discovery organization. But now if we release this, it'll hit accordingly against the project. But now if you take a look and you see there's an error message here because this particular revenue account is not mapped to the account group. So you have to pick revenue accounts that are needed here, that actually fit. And you can configure your account groups accordingly. So again, if we look up our income revenue, one of these accounts will work. So maybe it's sales and consulting. So if we go back and we pick 47,800, that error message goes away because now it's fine. So what Acumatica is trying to do is to make sure that we don't have GL accounts and things that are getting misbilled or misaccounted for. So the project gives you that level of control. So now let's go back to the project and let's bill it out from a milestone standpoint. And for this particular task, this implementation revenue, we know that we're 20% complete. So we go over to 20%, and you can see our pending invoice amount. We're starting to generate an invoice for this billing period. So we have $2,000 for this. Additionally, while we can use percentage, we can also just pick an amount. We can say here, 1,500. Percentage will automatically get calculated. But when it's done, we can hit the Run Project Billing. And what we get is a pro forma invoice. Now, this is an option. We can go directly to AR invoice. But the pro forma invoice gives specific information for the progress billing. And then what we could do is run our project billing. We have a pending invoice amount of $3,500. That looks good. But one thing to keep in mind is that while Acumatica will bill this top line, the second line for the $1,500, the task hasn't been made active yet. So Acumatica is going to hold off on generating that unless we make it active. So if we save it, and now we run our project billing, you get what you see as a pro forma invoice. So in this project, I have this turned on. This is an optional pro forma invoice. It's designed to allow you to send it out to the customer so that they can agree with the amounts, and then you could formally turn it into an invoice. It's a step in between an AR invoice. Again, you could turn this off and go right to an AR invoice. But the nice thing is you can pass this along to a customer and they can look at it. Notice what they can see here if we print it. It shows the customer information. It shows the task, the total revised amount, anything that's previously invoiced, and the total amount that's being invoiced right now. So that's how that works. And once you're done with this, go back, you can remove the hold and then release it to AR. And then you'll even have a link to the accounts receivable invoice from here. And if we go back to the project, you also get great visibility from invoices. So this project, any invoices that have been generated from this project, you can see them right here. And you can see the number, you can open it up, you can see the status, it's still on hold, the invoice total. And then had we generated and we removed the hold and generated an invoice, you'd see the AR document numbers here as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is a change order process. So Acumatica splits that into two steps, potentially. So Acumatica gives you the ability to start off with a change request. Change request workflow allows you to go out to the customer and then get them to approve the change. Once they do, then you can convert it to a change order. Once the change order is finalized, you can update the revenue budget. So if we were to go right to a change order and create a new one, we can give it a description. So we're adding something to the implementation. We have the ability to update the cost and the revenue budget. So earlier I mentioned the revenue budget, but you could do both. You also notice the change requests. So any outstanding change requests, maybe the customer approved 3 change requests. Well, you could select all of them, bring them right in, and then all of the revenue and cost budget will get accumulated and all added into one change order. So you could do that. But if we go to the revenue budget, maybe we want to make a change to our implementation governance. And maybe we want to do an additional 5 hours at a unit rate of 5,000. And now you have an updated number. Now, the other thing you could do is could be a change order deduct, or you could put a minus in here, and that'll put a negative change order together. So you could do that too. But I'm going to put in 5. And then I also notice that my cost is going to go up. I do have to put some additional time here. Pick my account group. This will be labor. And we're going to do 5 hours here at some rate. And now you can see the revenue budget total change is $1,250. Cost budget change is $225. There's a margin here. And if I remove the hold and release it, go back to the project, first thing I can see is a change order that's been closed, and essentially it's updated my revenue and cost budget. Now, if I go over to my revenue budget, I can scroll over to the right and you can see the governance So we had an original budget of 5,000, but we added something, and here's all our change order budgeted quantities that have been increased and the amounts. And now you have a revised budget amount, and that's what you use to go forward to invoice. You're invoicing this to get it to eventually zero, where you've invoiced everything against the budget. Same thing with the cost. Take a look at the cost budget here. We would add the columns for our budgeted stuff here. So budgeted CO quantity and also the revised budget amount and quantity. And we'll click OK here. And now when we scroll to the right, you can see those new amounts. And again, you're revised. By default, the column's not there. You would add it from the column chooser. So that's project accounting. When it's all said and done, you can mark activities complete. You can complete the project and move on to the next one. There's certainly a lot of functionality in here, a lot that we did not touch. We didn't talk about time and material or equipment. But if you have any additional questions about project, you're interested in seeing it or implementing it for your company, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and subscribing, and we'll talk to you soon.